All right, everybody, welcome back to the Be That 1% podcast. I am very excited about today's guest and episode as it's going to be different than most. We haven't really had this topic discussed at this depth with this perspective, and I'm really excited for you all to meet someone who I've had the pleasure of knowing for, man, at least at 5+ years and growing, and to watch her career continue to blossom with the people that she serves and the information she keeps putting out into the world. I couldn't be happier to have her on today. And that's Maggie Awad, who is a dear friend, but also really helping athletes address inflammation, uh, not go through burnout, continue to compete at high levels, and sustain greatness in all realms of high level athletes. We're talking NFL, NBA, Olympians. Maggie has been able to serve them with so many different factors, which she'll get into today. But I just kind of wanted to read you all a bio of who she is, what she's done, and what she's committed to, because she's a real one. She is a board certified family nurse practitioner who specializes in functional sports medicine. She is a founder of Elevate Performance, one of the most trusted medical pioneers in professional sports. If you want to learn more, go to her website and you'll see who she's worked with, what she's doing. Maggie's approach is based on decades of groundbreaking clinical work and research addressing one question. It's now branched into more questions, but this one is a key question. How do we reduce inflammation in high performers and professional athletes? And I'm excited to dive in, to pick your brain, to learn more about what you're seeing in the science, but also what you're seeing in behind closed doors with some of the world's best. And so, Maggie, thank you for being a great mom. Thank you for being a great leader. And thank you for treating your work with reverence and respect and bringing out the best in others. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Just such an honor to be here. I just remember when you first started this podcast a few years ago, and I was one of the most raving fans, which is how I found out about you. And just so grateful that you get to that you are committed to this work and putting out incredible research around mindset. So honored to be here.
Awesome. All right, let's jump in. I have one rapid fire question for you. And I know there's no prep for these, so whatever comes to your mind, you flow with it. But what is a quote that you recently heard or have really, had in your mind that you kind of live by or tend to operate with?
Hmm. I always go with one day at a time.
Mm.
It really shifts things in perspective for me. That was near and dear to me. That a mentor of mine, when I'm far out in the future or I'm in the past, she always reminds me to stay present. So one day
Mm.
at a time.
Love it. It's key.
It is.
All right. So you've worked with elite athletes across so many different industries, as we talked about earlier. What are they getting wrong, or what are they not thinking about when it's in regards to their own bodies?
Yeah. So the reason why I went into this work is because I feel like I'm also a mirror of them. And I know you, James, you work with a lot of high performers as well. So I know this podcast is going to be extremely relatable to people that are in the high performance setting. In Nike, they say if you have a body, you're an athlete. I feel like we're athletes in so many ways. We show up in so many dynamics as moms and dads and CEOs and high performers. And I felt like with athletes, there was a space, there was a gap that needed to be addressed. And, we talk about the Kobe mindset and going all in and how, we need to push through discomfort. And some of the things that I've learned through my health journey and being a mom and being an entrepreneur is that we are so comfortable in pushing through discomfort,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And that trait is great. It will get you far. However, without putting in the rest, there are health issues that do we do come across, and that I do see even at the very highest level, where they're asked, their body's asked to do so much, but they're so disconnected from their body, from their gut, from their energy, and then also really tuning into the signals that their body is giving them that there's something wrong.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, our culture definitely, the Western culture anyway, rewards that push uh energy, like you can go get more, 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 and then it comes at a cost,
Mhm.
and thank you for being someone who can pinpoint that and not say, hey, don't cut down on your work ethic, but let's make sure that the work that you are doing is sustainable so that you can continue to push or last longer. When you look at, someone like an athlete that you work with or a CEO, what are the first signals that tell you this person is gonna burn out soon, or this person has a really good strategy for longevity long term?
Mhm. So usually some of the first signals that I see is their energy is depleted,
Hmm.
right? And a lot of that we typically see, through midday crashes. Got to get that caffeine in around, 3, 4 o'clock. Also, where typically these people also have wear devices. They wear wearables.
Hmm. Hmm.
They've got their Aura ring on. They've got their Whoop on. Very disciplined people, but the data is not matching what they're feeling. Right, their data is telling them, hey, sleep is on point. But it's like, there's just something there. I'm not really recovering well. Having to push through the workouts, feeling really fatigued during the workout, and then also having something that we call in sports medicine delayed onset muscle soreness, where they're trying all the right things, they're doing all the biohacking, but it's just not matching up. So when we start seeing a lot of energy depletion, that's really the body saying that there's something wrong on a cellular level.
Hmm. And I know inflammation has been something that obviously have been focused on since the beginning. What was it about inflammation specifically that you're like, I want to at least focus here
Yeah,
initially, and maybe broadens from there, but why inflammation?
yeah. Reason being inflammation is because, I mean, I have my own story around this. I During COVID, one of the things that I was doing is I was training. I know, we all had our own vices. Some people were watching a lot of Netflix, some people would drink. For me, it was just a lot of training. And what I realized is that, my dad used to say, something too good of something's too much isn't good for
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
And so I wasn't adapting. I wasn't really I was putting a lot of stress on my body, but I wasn't adapting through recovery. And I think the thing that we really heavily focus on is the training part, and training is important. Acute inflammation, going back to your question, James, acute inflammation is necessary, and so I don't want to negate that, right? It is how our tissue repairs. It's how our body is sending signals to repair something. It's how we have muscle adaptation. The problem is chronic inflammation, right? And it's pretty much where there's a burning fire and it never goes off. And so that's where we start seeing injury accumulation, we start seeing slow recovery, and we see something that's called burnout.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, when I think of inflammation, I think of like if I have my shirt off and I'm looking at my stomach and it looks swollen, right? Are I imagine that there's some visual cues that one can notice on their body, but maybe what are the more subtle things that people can begin to strengthen their awareness around so that if they're feeling this, they can get tested or look deeper into it?
Right. I think with acute inflammation, we see a lot of it with skin conditions. I've had some pro athletes reach out to me for, you would think, because they want to get better on the court or on the field, and they'll be like, "Hey, there's some acne on my chin," and it just doesn't feel good. They're on the spotlight, they're getting pictures taken, and so that's one of the visible signs. For some people, it's hair loss.
Hmm.
For some people, it is bloating, like what you stated. For some people, it's joint fatigue. With a lot of athletes, where they just feel really fatigued in their joints and they're not really recovering as much. So I would say those would be probably the biggest symptoms, and also adding to that would be brain fog as
Hmm.
well.
And so if one is sensing these or noticing these symptoms, like, I mean, I imagine blood work is definitely going to give you a look under the hood, which is obviously something that you provide. What are some other like modalities or easy shifts to make to lessen? I mean, if aside from not training, uh, some things that we can add in to the time off, if you will.
Yeah. I think that question is great, and I get that asked, what is the what is the next thing? What's the biohack? Tell me the secret.
Right.
And it's the answer is not as sexy as what you want it to be, which is, what is the low hanging fruit that we're missing here?
Hmm.
And I think we in 2026 we're living at a time where we have all this incredible things, but we're really not in tune to what our ancestors did, and which is, are we getting enough sunlight?
Mm.
We are in front of blue screens all day. We are our phone is attached to our hip all day. We're working in front of our computer. We're exposed to blue light. That is also depleting our energy system, which is, we'll get to the mitochondria here in a little bit,
Hmm.
which is the energy source of each cell that's in the body, and that is getting depleted. We're also sleep deprived. Talk about pushing through and working and going all in. One of the things that gets tanked is sleep, you know. And one of the things that I tell my athletes is that, okay, well, there's a study that was done out in Stanford that athletes that got less than 6 hours of sleep were one times or almost two times at risk for injury.
Mm.
So we need to really refocus of our minds in, instead of what do we need to add on, we need to think about what are we not doing that is so simple, that is so free, that is just right at our fingertips, and something that Mother Nature has given us
Mm.
as resources.
So true. Like I think about when I travel and I go on vacation, how often I'm outdoors compared to when I'm home working in my flow. And it's like uh, 3 times the amount.
Yeah.
And granted, there's not the pressure of the work that travels with me on the vacation as much as when I'm at home, but I do feel my nervous system feels completely different in the places that I do travel to. And one of the contributing factors I think is because I'm very active. I'm in nature more. I'm walking. I'm moving differently, and that has an effect. And something as simple as sunlight, like not just for sleep, but for other mitochondrial functions, I think is a simple thing we all can do. And it's steps away if you work at home, or
Great.
even steps away outside of your office if you go travel there, you know?
Absolutely.
Um, you mentioned the mitochondria. I think that's something that I know people have been reaching out to you recently about. Talk to us about what that is for those that don't know what it is, and then why is it important? What do we do about it?
Yeah. So just to make it as simple as possible, the mitochondria, think of it as a power plant that's within your cell, right? And the more energy that we can produce within that cell, the better that we can show up in life, right? With a lot more energy, faster recovery, stable energy, more clearer thinking. And so one of the things that we need to understand with the mitochondria is that's very sensitive to our environment. All right, which is why sun is now a really huge subject. Getting exposed to the sun 20 minutes in the morning, particularly red light, red light part of the sun as when the sunrise go up. And it the more mitochondria that we have, it generates something called ATP. And so the more ATP that we have, the more energy that we have, right? So I usually say to people, and no offense to to Toyota at all, but it's like, okay, do you want to be a Toyota or do you want to be a Ferrari? All right. Well, to be a Ferrari, it has a different engine.
Hmm.
And for that engine is heavily sensitive to the sun. It's heavily sensitive to if we're drinking a lot of alcohol. It's heavily sensitive to processed foods, heavily sensitive to being sedentary. Um, there's a lot of research tied to HIIT workouts and zone two training in creating and generating healthier mitochondria, because as we get older, we start losing a lot of the mitochondria or the electrons. The
Mm.
ATP.
Well, this is good for me as my high rocks training continues.
I know, I know. You're crushing it, by the way.
Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Yeah, I gotta get that mitochondria strong.
For sure.
Um, it's also, am I right in thinking that the mitochondria, the stronger that is, then the better communication that the cells have with each other. It's just the more efficient the body becomes, right?
Hmm. Absolutely. I think one of the things that we don't really talk about when it comes to the mitochondria is the environment. And I'm
Hmm.
not talking about just, the sunlight, but also chronic stress damages the environment. Not being in a loving relationship damages the mitochondria. Community is important. And it's a sensitive thing where we look at also food. We look at the soil. Our soil right now is extremely depleted with a lot of nutrients and minerals since the 1940s, right? And so we're seeing a lot of glyphosate right now in our foods. And I know you probably know Dr. Zach Bush.
Hmm.
For the listeners that don't know Dr. Zach Bush, he is a pioneer in putting together, the gut brain axis in soil and farm, regenerative agriculture, and also talking about how glyphosate is also destroying our mitochondria and also destroying our gut. And so there's a lot of things right now that we're dealing with just from day to day travel, where our mitochondria is being put through a lot of stress.
Hmm. Yeah. And then, if we feel tired, we down some coffee to kind of numb those symptoms, which then feeds the disconnection that one has with their body until it's like glaring and screaming at you through an injury or through like it just takes you down. You're sick for weeks. Like it's like, okay, something's got to change. Sadly, that's what most people wait for.
Right.
Um,
I was one of those people. you know, this is why I started what I started. I was one of those people. I was in the past, I was in a very toxic relationship, and I, didn't really take care of myself. Being a mom, just on the go, go, go. Being an entrepreneur, putting my work first, sleep last, relationships last, putting fun last, putting play last. And we don't, I think this is again going back to the biohacking. I can really appreciate some of the things that are out there. And we really need to have an honest conversation with ourselves that not one supplement is going to fix some of the things that we're really trying to avoid
mhm.
in our daily life.
Yeah, I mean, the older I get and the more I travel, which I'm doing my best to lower that, so I'm getting better. I think about the demands that I require of myself to show up in the way that I want to for the clients that I serve. And I would say over the last three years, I've been very intentional about my environment, what I put in my body because of those factors. Not only do I have two kids now, and that requires a lot of energy, but I also don't want my relationship with my wife to suffer. I don't want the people that I care about to get the depleted version of me. So my question is, how do I continue to make my energy last uh, as long as it can, right before I have to regenerate through sleep and through other practices. And so some of the things that I've kind of keep to my mind as a philosophy. So I'd love your thoughts and tell me
Mhm.
if I'm off or on. Um, is in regards to food. One of my friends, John Kemp, said this years ago. He goes, "Jerf, just eat real food."
Mm,
And it's simple, but it's like if it comes out of a package, uh, it's probably not the best, right? You want whole organic, ideally, whole foods, and try and eat as much vegetables as you can,
mm,
and make sure your protein's good. And so for me, like those are just simple, easy, quirky ways of keeping what you eat for me front of mind of like, okay, I know I've tracked my calories too, so I kind of have an idea of like what type of foods are going to give me the energy that I want, and I'm very boring with my eating. Like it's
good.
not flashy. Rice, vegetables, meat for most meals. Like it's just kind of what it is. And Amanda, I don't know if I've influenced her too much, but she used to be very saucy
Yeah.
in all the foods, and now we're kind of just more regimented and dialed in, and we still have our fun, but it's like when you know what food does for you, you kind of don't want to mix it up,
Right.
and so there's that with food. I do understand the getting outdoors, so I am getting better at that. The sleep has been big, and the fabrics that I wear have also been big as far as like organic cotton or linen. I do my best to try and wear as much clothes with those types of fabrics as possible, and sleeping with a certain temperature in the house because I
Mhm.
run hot anyways. And if it's not like, man, 70, I start sweating. And Amanda's like, "Dude, you're a furnace. Get out of here." So those are like very simple, easy things that I think anyone can do initially that I've really been practicing the last 3 years.
It's amazing.
So I don't know if there's anything you want to.
You said your diet's boring, and I think we need to lean into boring a lot, right? Again, it goes back to going back to the basics, and the basics always work.
Mm-hmm. Is there a universal vegetable or universal food that, regardless of like where people are at, blood work wise, it's just always a good thing to eat more of this?
I always say garlic,
Mm,
garlic, olive oil. There's so much research tied to how much, and blueberries, we talk about polyphenols, polyphenol content. Garlic is huge. A lot of anti-cancer, also tied to autoimmunity, and blueberries tied to brain health. Olive oil is the same thing. Those three are I would be the top three
mm,
foods that I would really focus on heavily. Um, and as far as you talked about, your diet with some of the boring stuff, I would just add maybe a little bit of more fermentation to your foods. And I know some people are like, oh, I don't like kimchi, I don't like, kefir or anything like that. Maybe it could be just a little bit more of the fermented pickles, right? Because I think people can eat a little bit more of that stuff.
hmm
Or they have, fermented beets or carrots. We're not really eating a lot of foods that incorporate a lot of that.
I did buy some. Well, we love pickled onions now, so that's something
Mhm.
that we just kind of put in for flavor. But the kefir has been, um, or the sauerkraut has been a recent addition, and it's an acquired taste. I
It
didn't
is.
like it at first, but I eat for health more so than I eat for
Just
taste.
some
So I could.
yogurts to start off. At least have some yogurt.
Mm,
Um, and for those, I'm sure your listeners, where they also strength train a lot and count, macros. One of the things, I have a little bit of a sweet tooth at night, so I like to, make my yogurt bowl. So I'll do, a yogurt bowl, 0% fat. I'll add, a scoop of protein in there, mix it up. Put some blueberries in there, some protein cereal, cottage cheese, and it's just a treat. So I think
Mm,
it's also, each meal we just get to be really intentional about, okay, why am I eating this? And not to go to like sort of an eating disorder type of
hmm.
mentality. That's not what I'm talking about, but more of like, okay, this food is information for my body. And I know when I eat this food, it's going to, produce some type of, chemical reaction that's going to be either advantageous for my body, or it's going to,
Yeah.
not do so well.
I mean, all those factors that you listed before about what are the environmental factors that are damaging the mitochondria, of all those, from what you've understood, reading the science and just being exposed to so many different types of people over the years, what is the major uh like destroyer of mitochondria that people should like, if you're gonna do one thing that you get rid of this thing or severely minimize it.
Mhm. I think the number one destroyer of your mitochondria is not exercising. Exercise is huge within the mitochondria. It's what generates ATP. And also, mitochondria is heavily focused on muscle. So the more muscle that you have, the more mitochondrial cells you're going to
Mm,
end up generating as well. So this is why the research tied within the HIIT training and strength training as well, is so heavily focused.
mm, yeah, that makes sense. If protein is just a muscle is just a fascinating, also another subject to think about. I've listened to a few podcasts and read a few articles about just what muscle does in the body as far as keep you healthier, longevity supports more muscle tone and more muscle gain, mitochondrial health. You don't get as sick. Apparently, you're just healthier as a human being or overall. So if you guys are hesitant to get in the gym and start lifting weights,
Mhm.
or at least moving your body to where you have to require moving some resistance, I think that that's an
Mhm.
essential thing. Like
For
get
sure.
on that, look into that, start that.
For sure.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
I also want to add with what is the one thing we should do? And I think it's also important to talk about what we should not be doing.
hmm hmm.
And the things that we should not be doing are staring at blue light. Again, the mitochondria is heavily, heavily sensitive to that. And that's why there is talk about the sun generating, more energy and ATP within the cell. But also, what blue light does, it actually uh, it steals electrons
Mm.
from the mitochondria. So we want to be cognizant about being in front of our screens for a while. And I know there's a company. I'm not part of this company, nor do they endorse me, but it's called Iris. I think like for $1.99 a month, it gives you like this red, it's really faint tint on your computer, because I know a lot of your listeners work heavily in front of the computer, and making sure that you put that on your devices for your kids, and making sure that they're not exposed to blue light, and having, blue light glasses and in the evening, um and yeah, just
Hmm.
making sure that we're protected, our
It's
eyes are
called
protected.
Iris, you said,
Hmm.
and it basically changes the color of your screen,
Yeah,
so it's less.
it's kind of like a small like pink tint. You
Hmm.
could barely notice it. So
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'll put that in the show notes. So let's go from mitochondria to gut health
Mhm.
and how gut health ties to brain health. Again,
Yeah.
the older I get, the more mindful I want to be on what am I consuming, what am I exposing myself to that keeps my mind sharp. A lot of what I do is more on the mental side than the physical side, and I got to be very in tune with what I'm noticing, how my ideas are coming to me in in seconds, because that could be the difference between a team winning a championship
Right.
and not, or someone's life can be dramatically altered if the right question or the right space isn't created at that time for that athlete or that person. And so, showing up to these moments a game is very, very important. And like obviously what we eat is what we rebuild ourselves with. And so what have you noticed in your deep dives of gut brain health, and what is something that what do we need to know about it?
Yeah. This is actually my favorite subject,
Mm,
the gut brain axis. And was I mean, the way that I explain it to people is there's a big nerve that goes from the brain to the gut, and that's called the vagus nerve. And it's basically a nerve, and it's a highway where there's bilateral, communication back and forth throughout the day, right? What's interesting is that the gut sends 90% of the signals to the brain, not the other way around. So that saying where people say, trust your gut instinct, that's actually a real thing, you
mm,
know, because our gut's a lot more powerful. And also serotonin is made in there. So a lot of people that do have more of a lower mood or lower energy, not as motivated, tend to have that have a lot of gut issues,
mm,
tend to also have a lot of issues with producing serotonin.
mm.
And so this is why I'm so passionate about looking at gut health. And now there's a new era of medicine right now called psychoneuroimmunology, where now psychiatrists and psychologists and even therapists are now looking into how the gut is involved in brain health.
Yeah, I remember someone, I think it was a TED talk that I listened to a long time ago, said that there's three brains, right? We have our actual brain, then our heart and our gut, which all have nerve cells. And I guess, it's considered a brain if it has nerve cells. And of the three, do you know approximately like is I imagine the brain has the most nerve cells, but then is it then the gut and then the heart, or do you have any um have you read any of that research or
Well, I know that there's, gosh, about 30 trillion gut microbiome cells, which is the same amount as that we have in our human body, which
Hmm.
is insane. And so in relation to the brain, I would say maybe that's the same since we're
Hmm.
having 90% of communication back and forth.
Wow.
But it's pretty extensive. And people that do have something called that I've tested for intestinal permeability or leaky gut, before working with me, they tend to have a lot of brain fog and a lot of cognitive issues going on
Hmm.
and low depressive moods too.
So when I don't want to ask this, how does because I work with a lot of the athletes that I work with are females, and a lot of them are dancers, and a lot of the challenges that they face are focus, confidence,
Yeah.
emotional regulation, especially when pressure's on. And, pressure will do that to anybody, but they're in practice and over the span of their how they live their life, those are kind of the three pillars. How much of that could be and is gut related from your experience?
Mm-hmm. It could be. And I know for sure dancers because during my clinical work as a student, I would see one of the most challenging athletes were dancers. I
Mm,
remember being in a room with parents where we've told dancers before that they needed to, be off of that ankle for 5 to 8 weeks. And the dancers would actually be relieved. You can actually see in their face that, oh my God, I need a break,
hmm
right?
hmm
And the people that I saw really were triggered by that and were really reactive by that were the parents. And they're like, what do you mean 5 to 8 weeks? And it's very interesting. I do see that there are, going back to your questions, I feel the gut issues is not really from the performance part.
Hmm.
And then this is something that I need to learn since I don't really work with a lot of dancers, James,
Sure.
because when we look at intestinal permeability, a lot of the athletes that I work with are training for more than 60 minutes. And they're at higher risk. They're actually at 2, 3 times higher risk for gut impermeability because the blood is shifting from the gut to the muscles. And physiologically, that happens just so that way repair can start to happen. Now, with a dancer, from what I've seen and what I was exposed to in my clinical rotation, is that there was a lot of chronic stress.
Hmm.
It seemed like there was a lot of, perfectionism and a lot of, chronic stress that was going on in the house. And that could be just as detrimental as working out more than 60 minutes
Hmm.
um, to the gut. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
That
So tell me
can
more about
really.
the 60-minute threshold because it makes sense. Like I think about digestion being one of the most expensive things that your body does,
Mhm.
right? And depending on maybe when you eat or maybe even not, you're what I'm understanding when you said that is if I'm training for more than 60 minutes at a time for a long period of time, weeks, months, uh, there's a higher likelihood that
Mhm.
I'll have that impermeability.
That has to do more with temperature.
Okay.
So it could be 60 minutes, it could be 90 minutes, but it really that has to do with the temperature of the body. And when the body is exposed to really high temperature, you're more risk for intestinal permeability or leaky gut.
Interesting.
Mhm.
What is it that the heat is doing? Like, is it I don't know, is it just stressing the membranes of the cells and then they're just losing their resiliency or
I would say, well, from physiologically, what the heat is doing is we're not the gut lining is very sensitive to temperature. Okay. And so again, whenever we have blood shifting,
mm-hmm,
right? And blood also provides oxygen.
mm-hmm.
So when the blood is shifting from the gut to the muscles, you're not having as much oxygen in your gut to start repairing.
And it needs to repair quickly because of how much energy is required to use it and how frequently I imagine we use it,
Mhm.
right?
Exactly. Exactly. So one of the things that what having protein does, it's not just for just testosterone after a workout. Protein also, we got to look at the gut as a muscle. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're eating protein, we're introducing amino acids in order for the gut to repair itself.
Hmm. Okay.
Mhm.
And so what would your suggestion be to someone who trains because I'm thinking about myself, right? I think I'm at the gym 6 days a week.
Yeah.
I think my workouts can vary from 45 minutes to 75 minutes, but during my high rocks training, it was definitely 75 to 90 minutes for sure, like 4 or 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Um, Not to say that you're telling me to stop, but it's more so like, okay, if that's going to happen, here are the things that you got to really do to combat that, to make sure that your body is stay strong. I'm
Right.
hearing amino acids, so protein intake for sure.
Protein.
I've also been doing creatine, which I assume is helping more than hurting. Um, and yeah, I know some people do cold exposure, some do sauna. I'm not sure if that supports what we're talking about here, but is there one thing that maybe someone hasn't thought of or someone that they can do if they're training with that level of consistency and intensity?
Right. It would definitely be. have a strategy for cooling down after recovery. Put a cold towel behind your neck. I'm not a huge fan of
Mm,
dumping your body into a cold tub, because we want muscle adaptation to happen.
hmm
I would wait a little bit longer. So putting a cold towel behind your neck, making sure that you're hydrated. I think one of the things that we're not really cognizant about is being hydrated throughout the workouts as well. And also the third thing is that someone like you, James, that's training for high rocks, is at least having anywhere from 5 to 10 grams of glutamine. And what glutamine does is it helps supports the colon cells to stick together to maintain that integrity.
mm.
So you are not, so that way we're not putting you in a situation where you do end up having intestinal permeability.
Fascinating.
Mhm.
Do you just geek out over the science every day?
I
Because I know
do.
I would.
I do. I go in rabbit holes a lot.
I think I personally live in rabbit holes all day, every day.
Of course you do. You're a
Yeah.
mindset performance coach.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay. What's something that people are doing right now that they think is helping, but actually not really? It
hmm
might even be hurting them.
Yeah. I mean, of course, we talked from the very beginning about how, training hard, going all in, right?
Hmm
And they're also, chronically sleep deprived. Obviously, we know that that's going to break down muscle tissue. Using caffeine, to override fatigue. So, one of the things again is your body is sending out messages of, okay, maybe this fatigue is an energy or nutrient depletion. Maybe this fatigue is you needed rest. You need to have a break. And so those are some of the
Mm.
signals. We talked about the ice baths, really immediately after strength training. I feel like that is also it's not a really good opportunity to, create more muscle. It actually blunts the adaptation of muscle. And a lot of the things that I see, believe it or not, even at the very elite, I'm seeing a lot of chronic undereating. So just reminding yourself to eat, reminding yourself to not underfuel, and making sure that, that you're nutritionally fit.
Mm. Yeah. Undereating could, depending on time zones, how busy you are, how focused you get.
Mhm.
Yeah, eating can sometimes take the back seat for sure.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What's something that you personally have been implementing and really been loving that is complementing your work style and just all the goals and things that you care about?
You talking about as far as biohacking
Yeah,
or?
more so on the biohacking side. And but if anything else comes to mind, feel free to throw it in.
Yeah. So something that I've been really enjoyed doing is the sauna,
Hmm.
and I've been also trying to be intentional about not bringing my phone in there. Um, and it's just a time to, I know that the sauna is going to help. Also, talking about mitochondria, it's going to help with my mitochondrial health. It's going to help detox. It's one of those things where we're exposed to so many environmental toxins on a daily basis. It's kind of a free way to just be able to detox, and it also pushes me into meditating, having some time for myself, reading a book. Obviously, you get thirsty in the sauna, so I'll have my big jug of, electrolytes and creatine, and I'll put some trace minerals in there, to support a lot of the nutrients. So
hmm hmm
I really enjoy the sauna a lot.
How long are you staying in? 20?
So I'm saying 20 minutes. The research says anywhere from 150 to 170 degrees, 20 minutes, about 3 times a week.
Hmm
What Dr. Rhonda Patrick, she talks a lot about the sauna, and that's been her research. So
hmm
that's protocol that I follow.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Um, how does the heat affect, and maybe it does to women too, but for men, I've heard something about affecting the testicles of the men and the reproduction things. So
Yes.
like what do we be the men need to be aware of with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. So something that, going to mitochondrial health, men that have a lot of testosterone issues think that it's a testosterone issue, but it's not. It's not a hormonal issue. It's a mitochondrial issue.
Mm,
And with what the sauna does is it increases something called heat shock proteins. And what they found is that heat shock proteins actually increases human growth hormone by 300%.
okay.
So this is not the human growth hormone that you inject,
Yeah, this is natural.
which it actually we between the hours of 11 to 2 a.m. is when there's a lot of human growth hormone is produced during sleep, which is why another coaching thing with men is, hey, you want to bring your testosterone up, you want to make sure that you're asleep between the hours of 11 to 2.
Mm.
But with and also with the sauna, what is really cool is how much human growth hormones also increased.
And that's you said the 300 times? Is that what I heard?
Uh,
300%. Yeah. Is that in one sitting or is that like wow. Okay. And okay. Yes.
You're like,
My
I'm getting
mind's
sauna.
my mind's going wild right now. How many times a week is healthy? When how much should we not do? Like
Well,
seven
I'm
days
sure
too
then
much
they're
probably,
gonna
right?
buy a sauna. They're gonna go get. They're gonna go
Yeah,
in
yeah,
there and
yeah,
buy.
right.
Is that why you're asking? Like how much? Like in the beginning, my dad said too much of anything is not good.
Exactly.
So of course, everything is dose dependent, right?
Hmm.
Exercise is dose dependent. Food is dose dependent. Sauna is dose dependent. All of it. To really see the results, I would do 3 times a week.
Okay,
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah.
And people like Brian Johnson who are more on the extreme side of things, and
Yeah.
nature and history has proven that we need those types of individuals just to show us what's possible, and they're like human experimenters, and one of the things that he says he does is put ice on his testicles and just to preserve them. And so I'm curious if that is something that you would also suggest, or you don't think it's needed if you're doing 20 minutes and 150 to 170 degrees Fahrenheit um, sauna.
I'm really good about saying I'm gonna look more into that
Okay, cool.
and not act like I do. Didn't know about the ice on the testicles.
Yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
that's off for a loop, but
Okay. Cool.
um, I can imagine that the rationale behind that is to support mitochondrial health,
Hmm.
which you can do that also being in an ice bath
Hmm.
as well. Um, the the thing is with an ice bath is that if your mitochondrial health is really at a low, meaning you've got your energy sources are depleted, it's going to be really hard getting out of an ice bath and increasing your temperature. So you've got to really treat it. It's got to be for certain individuals,
Mm.
meaning if you feel like you're really healthy and you can increase your temperature of the body pretty quickly, I would celebrate that. I would say, hey, go for it. But I think if it was someone that was, came to me with, a lot of thyroid problems and they've got a lot of mitochondrial issues, and I would say, hey, let's start with like, ice on the face. Let's start with, ice behind your neck. This is not someone I would want to throw in a ice tub,
Hmm. Hmm.
just so that way we can get their mitochondrial health up because that way the brain is signaling that it's okay to, increase the temperature of the body. So,
Cool.
mhm.
Well, you got the I think you got the men's attention with the sauna. Uh,
Right?
For the women, anything out there that you would suggest for them to just stay optimal for whatever their desire. Let's assume that they're, relatively ambitious. They have goals they want to pursue. They have a family life that they're trying to hold down. Something that you would suggest being, a mother and ambitious professional who's committed to serving and impacting people all over the world. What would you suggest that they really double down on to really have a good relationship with to maintain longevity
Mm. I would say rest.
without guilt?
Hmm. Rest without guilt. 20 women in 2026 are different than the women in 1950. We've got a lot we have a lot going on our plate right now. A
Mhm.
lot more women are wearing a lot of hats, going to school, you know, being there for their children, holding down their jobs, trying to maintain a career, all with, you know, having our cycle, right? We have a menstrual cycle, which is a lot different than what men have to, think about. And so there are moments where I think it's important to listen to our body and, depending on our cycle, whether you're in menopause, there are moments where it's important to not feel that resting is something that's, that we have to earn, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
We need to earn rest. We get to rest.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm a supporter of this.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of information that gets circulated on the internet and social media in regards to health, and there's always seems to be a suggestion being made of like, oh, you can't do this, you got to do that. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
very contradictory.
Hmm.
So for someone who's listening and wants to deeper dive on what we've talked about or just their own curiosities, how do you go about thinking through who to listen to
Hmm.
in a world that has so much information coming around? Like, how do you sift through that?
How do I sift through the information?
Like, how do you know this is someone I should listen to
Hmm.
versus, oh, they're just clickbait
Oh,
or
okay.
they're just, being provocative to get, whatever attention?
Right. I think the less that you're on your device, the more you're going to know. Um, I think one of the things that I think what social media has brought, there is a beauty. We are now, we've got a lot of information on our fingertips. And I think
Hmm.
the negative downside is that we have a lot of information on our fingertips and add on more to the younger generation. And obviously, you work with a lot of girls that also have TikTok accounts too. And
Hmm.
I don't have a TikTok account. I can just only imagine that that would be a lot more. And then there's, TikTok shop, shop where you can just click and then just buy that product. I think if we have kids like that, I think we need to have a conversation with kids,
Hmm.
with our children about, making sure that, that there are some things out there. My son was asking me about peptides the other day.
Hmm. Hmm.
I'm a 22-year-old and he was asking me a lot about peptides. And I said, hey, peptides has been around for a really long time. This is not something new. But if you're thinking about taking peptides to build muscle, I kind of have a problem with that,
Mm.
right? Because now we are bypassing and we're trying to use something externally, where we need we need to teach our kids to kind of go through a little bit of hardship to earn the muscle in the
Hmm.
gym
Hmm.
or have discipline in the kitchen or teaching them how to make those choices throughout the day. So to go back to your question about how to sift through that information, I don't really look at follower count. And I think we really need to be cognizant about, oh, just because this person has 100,000 followers or 1 million followers or 10 million followers, that they know what they're talking about.
Hmm.
Um, that would be one thing that I would recommend. And if they're constantly trying to sell stuff to you, I would be cognizant about that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd
What
say
have
this,
you found?
I mean, very, very similar to that. I like people who can cite studies.
Hmm.
That's helpful for just the thought that they look at it,
Right,
and they're not just anecdotally saying this works for me, so it's going to work for you.
right.
I'm very wary of one size fits all strategies, because that doesn't take into account the individual and their back history and what they've experienced and how that might affect what sequence or what duration one does. And I'm a very customizable service provider, I guess. I want to get to know your exact thing so that we could build something that's uniquely yours.
Right.
That's not scalable, so that's my challenge to navigate. But I look for that in other people too. Like, okay, if you're in this type of situation, this might make sense for you. If you're experiencing this, you might want to start here. It's harder to do that, which is why I understand who people just blanket statement something or cookie cutter it because it's easier, but easier is not better,
Mm,
and I think we gotta stress test and battle test what we're saying so that it's more customizable, or at least present it in a way that these are the fundamentals. You could explore what you want, at least frame it that way, but that's not even happening. And then I think if it's on social media, first and foremost, most people are on it to get attention of some sort. Look at me, buy this, follow me. And if that's the intention, then they're going to do things that bring more of it to them. One way is offering value, true, but most of it is how do I say it in a way that grabs your attention
mhm,
and let me lead you somewhere.
mhm. Yeah.
So it's not my style, which is why I'm not
My.
crazy active on social. Um, so I would say, follower count don't like you said, don't follow into that. What science or what credibility are they speaking of before they give you any sort of recommendation? Where is it coming from? Uh, do they let you into how they're thinking about it? I think is another cool way, like showing your work, like you did in sixth grade math. Like, do that with them. Like, hey, here's what I was struggling with. Here's what I looked up. Here's where I looked. Here's what I found. Here's what I've done. And here's something that maybe you want to look at. It's not like you definitely need to look at this. Like it's more of an invitation than a force.
Mhm.
So I tend to gravitate towards individuals who do that.
Mm.
Yeah. But it's wild, wild west out there, And
It is.
if
And
you're not,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I've gotten the feedback from a lot of colleagues, and they're like, you're really selling yourself short with just doing athletes. Don't you want to, work with other people? I'm like, I do. I just don't really, advertise it as much. And I'm not here to scale. I'm here to make impact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie. I mean, money's important. Yeah, we do want to make money. And I think also just one of the things that we talked about is mitochondrial health and energy. And we also need to be mindful about where that energy is going, even in our work, and that we don't need to say yes to everything. And that it's okay that we're not for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I had to replay in my head over and over again when I started Elevate Performance Medicine, is that it's okay. I'm not for everybody. It's all right. It's all good.
Yes. And more is not always better.
Right.
I mean, that's the most logical thing. Okay, well, so how can we be more of this? Let's get more, more, more. And then
100,000 followers, 200,000 followers, 1 million.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So building the base of you, knowing what it is that you need, what you want, what's gonna make you feel purposeful and fulfilled, making sure that that's secure, and then, organically, in the right pace and the right time, letting that grow into whatever it ends up growing in. I think that's a way more sustainable approach. Might not be the people who are all about scales approach, but we all get to live the way we want to. But I think those that live more intentional are the ones that uh, are happier, are sustainable. They're, I don't know, they just, I'm probably maybe a little biased here, but I think their life is just, I don't know, they're able to squeeze more out of it. And with two young kids, 5 and 3, at this stage of my life, I'm only going to get this once. And
You
I'm
are.
squeezing it for all it has, and trying to make sure I can do what I can in my own little bubble, my own little ego sphere, so that I can be there for them. And so I think a lot of what you're talking about is not hard. It's not hard to understand. It may be a bit challenging to incorporate, maybe based on your current habits, but it's not a far reach. It's something that you can weave into every day,
Right.
assuming that that's what you want, And so I just appreciate you reminding myself, people that you work with, that yeah, if you want, go and perform. True, yes, do that. And if you, and here's what to be mindful of: if you want to do this for a long time, or you don't want the thing to take over who you are,
Right.
which I'm sure you see a lot in that elite level.
Absolutely. And which is where we hear a lot of people that do leave their sport if their identity is only tied to that sport and they don't have something outside of it, they really do struggle.
Hmm. Going back to your environmental um, risks, right?
Right.
Like loneliness is huge,
Oh, yeah, of course.
and
Especially if you're working with a team for a while.
right, and it might not be that you don't have anyone, but you've convinced yourself that you do, and then you isolate. And if you have no social connection, I mean, that also is wreaks havoc on the system. There's no way to co-regulate. There's no way to offload any emotional tension, spiritual tension you might be experiencing, and that compounded on top of the physical output
Mhm.
only further deep puts you in the hole,
Right.
And at first, all this can maybe sound overwhelming, like, well, man, I do that, I do that, I do that. Where should I start? But like, getting some sun, go for a walk,
Yeah.
drink some more water, get to bed earlier.
Right.
Let's start there. Okay. And then we'll weave
Let's
in the
start with
other.
the low hanging fruit for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. And then get your blood work done. I think that's something that everybody should do.
Mhm.
And whether it's Maggie doing it or your doctor or someone else, like, get a look under the hood. You do that for your car, you'll do it for your kids, like, do it for yourself so that you know what's going on. And sometimes it could be scary. Like, you might be concerned that if I do, it might really tell me that I have this thing that I'm afraid that I have. Yeah. And if you do, it's better to know sooner than it is to know later. Don't let your ego get in the way of, well, I'm younger, so I don't believe I have it, or you know what, I'm just gonna
Yeah.
eat better and it'll go away on its own. Like, just get it looked at. Then you have a base to work from. Um, so if you haven't gotten blood work in a while, highly suggest that.
I couldn't agree more.
Is there anything else that we left out or that you want to circle back on one last time before we wrap?
No, I think we covered a lot of bases. We went kind of deep, which I love.
Good, good. Um, yeah, I just, we don't, it doesn't have to be complicated.
No.
Yeah. And I think you're a great example of that. So thank you for all that you've done. And by the way, for those of you who followed my 100-mile attempt, um, Maggie was the one who actually supported me with nutrition on that. I called the best that I know. I'm like, all right, Maggie, here's
Yeah.
my crazy self. I haven't trained for this, but we're going for it.
Going for it.
And I think I only was able to get as far as I did before that chafing started because of what you had suggested. And not only did I last longer without training, but the recovery
Mm.
was so fast. Like, yeah, that night sucked. And Amanda had to like basically carry me up the stairs. But when I woke up the next morning, I could function. I could walk. I could move. Or I couldn't say that before with my 78-mile one and then my
First
61.
one. I remember the first one.
Yeah. So, just another thank you to you for supporting me on that. And
Of
I know
course.
that's not as elite as some of the work athletes that you have right
Oh God,
now,
I
but
don't think they would have ran that much. There's no way. I don't think so.
certain person want to say yes to that.
Yeah, no, not many would, James.
Cool. Well, thank you, Maggie. Any
Thank
last words?
thank you to you. Just love, love listening to your podcast. I know for me as an entrepreneur and someone that, I started this just for the listeners, just so y'all know, James was a really big proponent of Elevate Performance Medicine. I was going to school for a while and uh, got my degree, and I've always was trying to seek and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I attribute a lot of what I've created these past 5 years. Elevate Performance Medicine just celebrated 5 years last month,
Let's go.
and James was a really huge part of that vision. So I'm just so incredibly grateful. I know it starts with being present. It starts with being in tune with ourselves. Also, currently working with James as a coach. I truly feel like if we're playing a big game, we need to have people around us to support us. And you've just every single level that I've had to that I've got to um, uh, be in my life. You were a really big part of that, and so I'm just so grateful.
Thank you, Maggie. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. For those listening, go out there, be your own 1%, do simple better, get some sun, go for a walk, drink some water. Much love.